Okay, I'm going to stitch the Peace on Earth in the hoop ornament. Um, Bear with me, I have a cold and I know my voice sounds terrible, but it is what it is. So I actually sound worse than I feel. So, okay, the first thing you want to do is hoop cutaway stabilizer. Um, Decide on what kind of fabric that you want to use. I'm going to use really thin, if you can see that, shiny cork fabric. Um, I think I got this at Walmart, and it's really super thin, and it looks really pretty. It works very well for ornaments. I don't know that it would be thick enough to make a bag or anything like that with, but for an ornament, it works really well and very pliable. So I'm going to use that for my front and my back, and then the ornament has an applique in the middle, which I'm going to use felt for. So, okay, I've got my design loaded. I'm not using a standard hoop that came with my machine, so I am going to use my camera to just make sure that everything lines up correctly. Excuse me. And it does. You always want to double check that because if your needle hits the side of these hoops, it will break your machine. So that's why I double check that. Okay, so the first stitch is going to be the placement stitch for the ornament. So I'm going to stitch that, and then it's going to stitch the placement line for the applique. Then I'm going to put the felt on the applique piece. Then it'll stitch the tack down of the applique stitch. And then when that's done stitching, I'm going to cut around the placement line, the tack down line, and then put the hoop back on the machine, and it'll stitch the satin stitch that goes around it. So I'm going to do those first couple of things, and then while it's stitching the satin stitch, I'll turn off the camera because I think that takes 6 or 7 minutes. So just bear with me, and I'll show you as I'm going along what I'm doing. Okay, this is going to be the placement stitch for the ornament. Okay, you can see the placement stitch for the base of the ornament. So I'm going to make sure that is completely covered, and then the next stitch will stitch the placement line for the applique part. Okay, that stitched the placement stitch for the applique, which I'm going to use black felt for. Okay. This will tack down the felt. Okay, that tacked down the felt. Can you see that? And now I'm going to take my little tiny applique scissors, which I absolutely love using these scissors for applique because they're really tiny and I can get real close to the stitches. I want to get as close as I possibly can without clipping into the stitches. This is pretty thick felt, so I just want to make sure that I'm getting as close as I possibly can, and it doesn't stick out. Little tiny stitches, or little tiny cuts, I should say. You wouldn't have to be quite as careful with fabric because it's not as thick, but this felt is quite thick. Okay, now I'm going to take my little nippers, let me see these, and I'm going to very carefully clip a little closer to the stitch line. You really want to be careful not to clip into the stitches, but you want all this fabric cut away because otherwise it won't be covered by your satin stitch. And the satin stitch is pretty thick, but even still, especially if you're using a thick fabric like this felt. This felt is actually as thick as vinyl. So if you take your time and trim it very carefully and make sure all the fabric is removed, you won't have any problem at all. Almost done. One more side to go. This is somewhat challenging using metal nippers with a magnetic hoop because it wants to pull. Okay. That should be good. Okay. As you can see how closely I've trimmed. It might be a tad overkill, but better than starting over. Okay, I'm putting the hoop back on the machine. The next step is going to stitch the satin around the applique, and then the letters Peace on Earth is going to stitch the mistletoe up on top and the berries, and then the placement line for the grommet or hanger. So I'll come back after that is done stitching. Actually, I'll come back after the satin is stitched so you can see it. Okay, I just stitched the satin around the applique, and now I'm going to put my hoop back on the machine, and it's going to stitch out the Peace on Earth, the mistletoe, the holly berries, and the placement line for my hanger. And I'll come back and show you that. Okay, I just finished stitching the wording and the mistletoe, holly berries, and the placement for the for your hanger hole. Now I'm going to attach the backing. I'm using the same sort of vinyl fabric cork stuff that I use for the front. And I, as I previously stated, am a pinner, especially when it, there we go. I haven't had good luck with this machine and tape. I've gotten so I just use pins. I just make sure that I'm out of the stitch line and everything is covered correctly. Always pin top to bottom so that the end of your pin, you see that? So that the end of your pin is facing upwards and not facing down so it doesn't scratch your needle plate. Okay, I'm going to reattach the hoop and I'll stitch the final bean stitch outline, which will attach the front to the back, and then I'll come back and show you. Okay, there we go. The backing is attached to the front. Now I'm gonna unhoop it and cut around the final bean stitch, and I'll come back and I'll show you how to attach. I usually use cording and 2 or 3 beads when I'm making a hanger. So I'll show you that. I'm also going to stitch the 5x7 version of this. It's exactly the same design, only in the 5x7 version it's going to have 2 holes right here for a different kind of a hanger. I'll show you how to make a metal hanger for that one. So I'll come back and show you that. Okay, I'm back and I'm going to stitch the 5x7 version of the Peace on Earth ornament, hanger, whatever. So I'm just getting that loaded in my machine now. And assigning the colors. Oh. Bear with me. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to attach my hoop to my machine, and okay, so just like every other ornament or hanger or whatever, it's the first step is going to be stitched directly on the stabilizer. I've hooped cutaway stabilizer. I'm using black cutaway stabilizer because I'm using black or darker fabric for my base front and back. I did the same thing with the 4x4. I just like it with darker colors because you don't see the white cutaway stabilizer in between the layers. And I like to use cutaway because it adds additional stability, so it's going to stay in your project, so it is going to be visible. So if I'm using darker colors, I want to use a darker color stabilizer. So first step is going to, like I said, is going to stitch the placement line for the background of the ornament. Okay, now I want to make sure that the placement line is completely covered with my background fabric, which I'm using very thick felt. This felt is as thick as vinyl. It's really, I absolutely love it. I think it's called the premium felt from Joann's. I buy it by 10 yards at a time. So it's just gigantic, lovely, thick felt. You can tell the difference. This is just a regular felt. The white is, and the black, it's like double. So I just love it. Okay, so the next stitch is going to stitch out the placement line for the center applique. Okay, this is the placement line for the center applique. I'm going to cover that entirely with felt, making sure it's in place. Now I will tack that down. Okay, now I'm going to trim along the stitch line as close as I can without clipping into the stitches. This felt isn't nearly as thick as the felt that I used on the 4x4 version, so I'm not going to have to be as careful. The thicker your material or your felt, the more care you want to take with making sure that you're close enough to the stitch line so that the satin stitch can completely cover it. Okay. Well, I stuck my nippers someplace. I'm not sure where I put them. Okay, I think I'm close enough. Okay, so the next step is going to stitch out the satin stitch around the entire ornament, and I'm going to stitch that. I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Okay, the satin stitching is completed all the way around, and now the rest of the design elements are going to stitch, and then when I come back it'll be time to attach the backing. Okay, now the last thing that needs to be done is the backing needs to be stitched onto the front. So I'm going to put my backing felt underneath my hoop and run the final bean stitch, and then we'll be done. Okay, and I'm just going to double check that the backing is on. It is. It's straight. And we're done. So now I'm going to unhoop this, trim up my few little jumps on here, and then when I come back, we'll do the hangers for both the 4x4, which just has one grommet hole up at the top, and the 5x7, which has the 2 holes on the side. So let me get that done and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm going to show you how I'm finishing off both of these, the 4x4 and the 5x7. So I've cut them both out. This one, if you recall, the 4x4 was done on vinyl. When I when I punch holes in vinyl, I always use a grommet. When I put holes in felt or fabric, I kind of play it by ear. Most of the time, I don't add a grommet. It's just my preference. I'm not quite sure why I do that, other than it's just the way I like to do it. So the first thing I'm going to do with the 4x4 is punch my hole. And I'm using a can snap press. And I use this little cutting mat underneath it so that it's not metal on metal cutting, because I think it wears the cutter down. And I just line it up to inside the grommet hole and press down. And there we go. And then to put the grommet on, I use 2-piece grommets or eyelets, whatever you want to call them. The front piece goes in the top like this. And I kind of smash the vinyl down around the back side so that it's really on there. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. Okay, so see the grommet is pushed all the way through. And then you just put the little ring on the back of it. Which is easier said than done when you don't have fingernails. Okay, so the ring is on the back side. And then I take my handy dandy crocodile and put the grommet right on top of there and press down. Squeeze it down. And that squeezes the little ends around it so it's nice and finished. Okay, so that's one. Sorry, I have carpal tunnel in my hand and it freezes up on me sometimes. Okay, so then I took a piece of twine. This is definitely longer than what I'm going to need, but I think it was about 1 foot long. Folded it in half, tied an overhand knot at the end, and then I put 3 beads on here. And then open it back up. Sorry, my hand is not behaving. Okay, so one end goes through your ornament like that, and you get it to the size that you want it. That's about what I like. Okay, and then you're going to tie your ends in a knot. It would be very helpful if I had an extra pair of hands right now, but I don't. Okay, so just tie it in 2 overhand knots. And then pull the knot as tight as you can. Okay, and then a pair of scissors. Then I just trim up the ends, just like that. Okay, and there you have your ornament. Now, there's many ways of doing these little hangers. This is just the way that I do it. It holds up very well. I like the way that the twine works with the beads. I have no problem getting the twine through the ends of the beads. If you do have problems doing that, put both ends together as tight as you can and put a little piece of painter's tape on the end and make like a needle out of it. And then kind of thread the beads through and then cut the tape off. It works really well. Okay, so that's that one. The 5x7, this is the one that you have 2 holes for the hangers. So I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did with my other one. Poke the 2 holes out. Okay, there's one. Oh, my hand is just driving me crazy. Okay, then the other one. Oh, that one didn't go through. Sometimes when the felt is thick, you have to kind of poke it through, poke the little ends through. Okay, then this one, because there's 2 of them, I'm going to use a piece of 20 gauge wire to make a little hanger. And I guess I got about a foot of wire, and I just want to kind of have it in half so I can approximately see how much I'm going to need. And then you want to take the back of it and put each piece of wire through the back, or each end of the wire, I should say, till you get the size that you want the hanger to be. And you want extra wire because you want to have the ends so that you can curl them. Okay. And once that's done, then you take your wire and you wrap it around once so that it stays in place. And then I take a pen, or in this case a Sharpie, and use it to circle my ends. I'm sure that there is a name for this. I don't know what it is. Let me see if I can find a pair of pliers. Okay. The other thing you can do is use a pair of pliers to do it. And you just kind of keep circling. Like that. It looks kind of messy when you're doing it like this, but it looks really cute when you're done. Okay. And then bend the wire so that the little curly part is up against your hanger. There you go. So then you want to do the exact same thing with this side. And if you have a little bit too much wire, like I do, and you want to cut the piece down a little bit, let me get my little pliers. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm going to take another couple inches off just to make the ends match. Now they're about the same length. And then do the exact same thing. This time I'm using a little pair of pliers, that's working a lot easier. And twirl all the way up to the end. Okay, and not too tight because you want to be able to get the pliers out. Okay, and there you go. And there's your little hanger. Ta-da! So, I hope I've explained this well. I'm actually going to take this side off, I think, and redo it with the smaller pliers just because I want to keep it consistent. This goes much smoother when you don't have carpal tunnel. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other side. And it's going to make my hanger a little bit smaller, but that's okay. I actually like that better. Okay. There we go. Now both sides match. Okay. So there you go. All done.